Anderson Hall on the campus of University of Nebraska-Lincoln. This is 90.3 KRNU Lincoln.
Up the floor to Trey McGowan. He'll lob it for his...
On 90.3 KRNU, it's Huskers Hoops Live.
You betcha! Jazz Shelley has a triple-double!
Now, here's your host, Jacob Schwantz.
Welcome into Huskers Hoops Live, 16th episode of this college basketball season. Got some really interesting stuff to talk about in the world of Nebraska basketball this week. Going to be going over the past week's games. We've had a blowout win for the men's basketball team. We've seen the Husker women's basketball team fall from grace and then get back into the winning ways. It was a very interesting week of basketball, and I'm excited to talk about it. We got some very important games to look at in the future of this week, including just tonight even, where the women's basketball team hosts Northwestern. We're going to be talking about that game a bit. Also going to look around at the standings at around the middle of the show, looking at the Big Ten standings, and then also maybe taking a glimpse at the net rankings and the bracketologies for right now, just to kind of see where both these teams are kind of looking, because it's getting close to that point in the season where bracketologies are becoming more and more accurate to what we're going to actually see in March Madness. I would say at this point, with how few games there are left in the regular season, I don't know if this is the most accurate bracketology, maybe the next week's or whenever the next one comes out. But until any results change in the Big Ten tournament or all the rest of the conference tournaments, more likely than not, these bracketologies are going to be almost completely accurate based on the years of history where most of the teams are either just placed in the wrong city, but they're going to be in it at that same exact seed that was predicted in whoever's bracketology. So it's definitely important to start looking at these things for Nebraska basketball, just to see what are some matchups we could potentially see in just a couple of weeks. We are just over a week away from the month of March, and it is getting to the point in time where it's the best time in basketball. You got March Madness, you've got the late NBA regular season push for the playoffs, and I can't wait to get into all of it, as I'll be with you the rest of the way through this season. It's going to be a fun ride. But some big news dropped yesterday afternoon, so I'm not going to get into all these crazy details, but a lawsuit coming in motion against people involved with the Husker women's basketball program. I only talk about this because I want to talk about what some sort of distraction like this could mean for the end of the season, because when you have this much of a distraction in one of the most pivotal times in the season for Nebraska, I feel like it's going to be a big challenge, because they're trying to wrap up this regular season with as high of a net ranking as possible, right? And you go into this week with the net 30 ranking, which that's a pretty high, that's a top half seed, I would say, in March Madness for the women's basketball team. So it should be a pretty good postseason as long as they can smooth things over and finish things in this regular season, the final 3 games, maybe make a little run during the Big Ten tournament, maybe pull off one upset and do some good things there. But if they're unable to do that, I feel like this distraction could be a huge challenge. And they've got some final matchups in the regular season, including tonight, against some lower-ranked teams in the Big Ten. They've got Northwestern. I believe they are second last in the conference standings right now at 3-11 in the Big Ten conference games. After that, I believe, is Minnesota and Illinois. So those are 2 teams in, looks like, the bottom 6 of the Big Ten in conference record. So those are games that on paper Nebraska's women's basketball team should win, but with this distraction, you almost never know how it could impact the team. It could bring them closer together. It could also completely throw things off, and Nebraska could find themselves more on the bubble if they can't finish out some of these games. So definitely something that they are going to need to keep an eye on. Let's get into the men's basketball game now, though. Hosted Penn State this past weekend. It was kind of a rare off week that Nebraska has seen this year. It's been a lot of quick games right after either a win or a loss in quick fashion, maybe 1 or 2 days off in between. But this past week, they had off since that last game against Michigan. They had a whole week, no midweek game, and then they came into Saturday and hosted these Penn State Nittany Lions and took the victory 68-49. It was a defensive battle in the vault, if you will. It was the lowest total that Nebraska's allowed in Big Ten play since the 2014-2015 season, which I thought was pretty interesting because Penn State is not a fantastic team this year. They are currently in the bottom 3 in the Big Ten standings. Made a nice run last year through the Big Ten tournament when some people thought maybe they would get out maybe a round or 2 in. Ended up having some success in March Madness as well because of the shooting of guys like Seth Lundy and Andrew Funk. And then you obviously had Jalen Pickett kind of point guarding the way through all the competition. That was a really veteran-led team and consistent team, one of the best shooting teams in the country. That's not what they are this year. And I think Nebraska was able to show that defensively. It was an awful offense performance from both sides. In the first 20 minutes, it was 28-22 heading into the halftime locker room. But then that second half, it was like a switch had flipped on the side of Big Red. They score 40 points alone in the second half, and that total is just 10 shy of the combined total between Nebraska and Penn State from the first half. So, that just goes to show Nebraska was not hitting at all in those first 20 minutes, but then kind of got back into their season average where, they can give you 35, 40 points in a half. It's really just going to be whether they can stop you. And luckily in this game, that was a game where they were making a ton of stops. It was the second lowest scoring game allowed so far this season. You think back all the way to the road victory against Kansas State, where they gave up 48 points in that one. To be able to get all the way this late in the season and still be putting up defensive performances like they are is really impressive to me. But you get a big performance in this one from Keisei Tominaga. 6 of 14 from the field. He had 3 3-pointers, 17 points overall. And, probably his highlight of the night, that step-back 3 on the left wing. That was just chef's kiss, just beautiful. Not a lot of guys can hit that shot. It took a good amount of balance. It took range on your jump shot, and Keisei hit it calmly and just kind of strolled back on defense. And, that's the shot he can hit on any given time he puts one up from the floor. So when people say, you have to just kind of live with the Keisei Tominaga experience, that's kind of why. Because if you don't let him do that, he's not going to make highlight plays like we saw in that Penn State game with that step-back 3. So that's why you kind of you live with some of those shots from Keisei, because he'll lead you into the right direction in college basketball. You just have to let him. So they also got 13 points from Jawan Gary, 12 from Rink Mast, kind of in support. Only 3 double-figure scorers in this one, but I almost think it could be pretty important at this point in the season to show that this Husker team can win these ugly games, because at this point in the year, it's almost March. It doesn't matter if you're winning by 20, by 15, 10 points, 5 points, 1 point. All that matters is that you're winning the game, right? It doesn't matter if you put up a performance like we saw recently in the Big Ten with Michigan State. They ended up losing that game, but it was like 58-55, I want to say, against Minnesota. Very low scoring game, but I think it was Minnesota. They'll take that any day of the week. Let me double check. I believe it was, 59-56. Minnesota beat Michigan State on February 6th in that way. They're going to take that win every day of the week. They don't care that they didn't score 60 points. That's a win over Michigan State in February. That's a quality win. So Nebraska, it might not have been the picture-perfect performance against one of the lower-tier Big Ten teams this season, but it's still a win on the schedule. And it's important to be able to continue to do this because now you look at the Nebraska schedule, they're 18-8 on the season. That's one of the best records they've had in a while. And they're 16-1 at home, one of the best home records in the country. And it doesn't matter if it's ugly, is basically what I'm saying. They brought that big starting lineup where you've got Casey, Bryce Williams, Juwan Gary, Josiah Alec, and Rink Mast. And I think it's working, guys. I mean, 2 of the 3 games since that implementation of that starting lineup have been a stout defensive clinic. I mean, the only one that was bad was Northwestern, and the Wildcats had a lot to prove and get revenge on against Nebraska since they lost in Lincoln. But the other 2 games, Michigan and Penn State, I know that they're not great teams in the Big Ten this year, but even if you're not having a good season, allowing only 59 points and then 49 against Penn State, that is impressive, regardless of opponent. That's a D1, Power 5, Big Ten school that's getting completely shut down because of the defense. So you have to give the props in order to really understand and explain how this game went. And we'll see if this lineup is the truth in these upcoming games. Of course, road game against Indiana coming up real soon. But if this lineup is real, I mean, look out, Big Ten, because Nebraska is going to finish the season. If this lineup is the truth and the defense is real, I feel like they could win. They could win out and maybe get into that top 5 in the Big Ten and firmly plant themselves in a March Madness at-large bid. And it's going to take probably a couple more wins in the regular season. I think they need to get 20 wins and maybe a couple of wins in the Big Ten tournament. And I think they should be able to do that to plant themselves in that March Madness kind of comfortable seeding range. They out-rebounded Penn State 42-31. Again, a very important stat because some of these games coming up on the schedule are not going to be easy. Got a road game at Michigan to finish the year. They are, of course, going to be looking for some revenge. You've got a road game at Indiana coming up in just over 24 hours from now. Those are 2 teams that Nebraska beat earlier in the year in pretty convincing fashion that are going to be looking to really get their get back, especially Indiana, because they are 6-8 in the conference. They are outside of that top 7 where you're trying to be to maybe be in range to make a late season run to maybe get in at the last second to the March Madness tournament, but they need to turn things up quickly. They're 14-11. They can't really afford another loss this season, especially with the way that the committee is grading the Big Ten. So if Nebraska can't rebound against Indiana, it's going to be a loss, in my opinion, because Indiana is a solid team. They've got great scorers, and I'll talk about it a little bit later on in the show, but that is not going to be an easy matchup, and rebounding is going to be key in that one because, of course, Indiana is such a good rebounding team. But yeah, I don't have too much else to add to this one. It was very similar to the Kansas State game we saw earlier in the year where the opposing team is just going to miss shots for us. So, the defense was great, but it didn't even need to be. That gives Nebraska their 16th home win of the season. They are, I guess you could say, just below or maybe tied with Houston because Houston won last night against Iowa State in a massive Big 12 matchup. So they are now 16-0 in their home arena. So Nebraska is technically, I believe, second or tied for first for the best home record in the country. But there's a great chance to establish some more March Madness standing with a couple of important games coming up in the next few days. We'll talk about them a little bit later on in the show, but I'm going to step aside here on Huskers Hoops Live. And when I come back, we'll start to break down some of the women's basketball games from this past week right here on 90.3 KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
Do you want to make a difference for kids, for people in poverty, for the environment? Join AmeriCorps and get things done right here in Nebraska. With lots of different programs to choose from, you can serve in your area of passion and develop your skills while earning money to pay for college or to repay student loans. All programs are filling AmeriCorps positions to start September 1st. Learn more and apply at serve.nebraska.gov. Sponsored by Serve Nebraska. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Air, fundamental to all living things, and it's all thanks to trees. Not only do trees supply oxygen, they also provide homes to wildlife, filter water, and let's not forget their natural beauty. But the trees need your help. The Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation is doing their part to revitalize forests across the country, and you can help. Donate to the Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation today by visiting www.arborday.org. Be that breath of fresh air and ensure forests live on for future generations.
This is Logan.
What's up, everyone?
Logan's been going to UNL for 4 years now.
I know everything that's going on here.
Logan is somewhat informed about campus events.
Like the football game, and I think there's some kind of election, I think.
Don't be like Logan. Pick up a copy of the Daily Nebraskan or follow them on Facebook and Twitter. Not only can you be updated with events on campus, you can read profiles on some of the most interesting people around Lincoln and get unique coverage found nowhere else, because keeping up with the news is one of the most important things a student can do.
Dad, I'm hungry. Why don't we have anything to eat?
Those are words you never want to hear as a parent. But unfortunately, putting food on the table is a constant struggle for many low-income families here in Lincoln, and they don't have the necessary skills to get and maintain a job. They rely on volunteers at the Center for People in Need that can help them through the struggle. You can make a difference in their lives by getting involved in one of the many volunteer programs that the Center for People in Need offers. For more information, please visit centerforpeopleinneed.org.
What are you still doing with all those old t-shirts that don't even fit anymore? Why not get rid of them by donating them to Goodwill of Lincoln? Goodwill of Lincoln is a not-for-profit organization that takes nearly any household item and item of clothing. Its main mission is willing workers employed and community resources maximized. Goodwill also provides a safe environment for people with mental, physical, and emotional disabilities to be employed. So what are you still doing with those t-shirts? Your freshman 15 is less noticeable in a slightly bigger shirt anyway. Donate the small ones to Goodwill of Lincoln. To contact Goodwill of Lincoln, go to lincolngoodwill.org.
Exaggerating high school athletic achievements to your new college friends. Promising your new college friends that you a partial football scholarship to no-name state in Montana. What are these, you ask? These are the symptoms of someone with high school peaker syndrome, or HSPS. HSPS is a serious mental health condition that affects college students post-high school athletics. Thankfully, there is a cure to this crippling disease known as the UNL men's rugby team. UNL men's rugby team offers students the opportunity to relive those glory days. Tackle your HSPS head-on by visiting the rugby team's website at unlrugby.com.
Jake Schromp's back with you on Huskers Hoops Live. Thanks for joining me this morning, February 20th, around 8:19 a.m. in Lincoln, Nebraska. Let's get into some women's basketball coverage for the Huskers. Had a couple of games last week, started on the road at Ohio State. And folks, this was a disappointing loss. No other way to put it. You go and take down Iowa, the number 2 team in the country at that point, at home. Couple of days later, Ohio State, they have replaced Iowa as the number 2 ranking in the nation. That's back-to-back chances to pick up what would be top 5 wins. And if you win both those games, I would say you're an absolute lock with what Nebraska's record was at getting into the March Madness tournament. But ends up being an 80-47 loss. This one was ugly from the beginning, and it looked like Nebraska had left all of that momentum and just grit, I would say, in Lincoln. Unfortunately. I mean, this was a game that Nebraska had probably circled on the schedule because of how talented Ohio State is, and they couldn't dethrone them in this one attempt on the season. I don't want to stick on this one too much just because it was pretty much bad all the way around, because Nebraska just clearly off the scoreboard had nothing in this one to offer that could match Ohio State. I mean, you give up 23 points to J.C. Sheldon, 20 points for Cody McMahon. That's kind of the dynamic duo you have to watch out for with this Buckeyes team, I would say. And, I mean, it only took 3 double-figure scores for the Buckeyes to reach 80 points as a team. And that is just crazy to see. Ohio State might be my March Madness pick to go all the way at this point in the season. They are playing absolutely insane basketball right now. I don't think they've lost in quite a while. They were probably supposed to lose at Iowa to Iowa, but ended up picking up that win. And I think since then they've been perfect. And I don't know what team other than maybe South Carolina that you'd be comfortable saying they are better than Ohio State. It's going to be a tough one to pick. They can just win in different ways on any given night. It could be the guard room. It could be the front court. It could be, like we saw against Nebraska, unfortunately, it could be a combination of both, where Sheldon and McMahon, or Taylor Theory and Mikala Shikova is going off. So they have just so many options on the offensive side of the ball. They rebound well, and it's just never an easy night when you go up against an Ohio State team with this caliber of talent on it. But the biggest problem, though, I would say for Nebraska's offense was maybe the turnovers. Definitely the turnovers. 30 turnovers in this game is absolutely insane. I mean, this failure to generate any sort of offense by Nebraska completely gave up any chance of building a comeback, momentum, even anything to look forward to the rest of the season. That was just awful to watch. And it was kind of crazy to see this from a team that I think you could argue had some of the most momentum in the entire nation. You defeat Iowa for just the Hawkeyes' 3rd loss of the season. That puts you in some nice standing in the country with Ohio State, no less, as the only other Big Ten team that had beaten Iowa at this point in the season. And you go into that matchup against those Buckeyes and completely just get outworked. And that is never fun to see your team do that. But another big problem on the Nebraska offense was that I'm not even sure they had enough on this night to score with Ohio State, because there were 0 Huskers in double figures in this game. So not only was Nebraska giving up extra chances to the Buckeyes, but OSU was completely clamping up and locking down Nebraska. The high scorer was 9 points from Alexis Markowski. Shelley goes 2 for 9 from the field after being named the AP Player of the Week for her performance in the week against Iowa. But you've got Natalie Potts going 2 for 8. Kendall Moriarty in the starting lineup going 2 for 6. She's been pretty consistent this year. You got to give her credit, but it just wasn't her night. And overall, that kind of just shows you what kind of an offensive night it was for this Husker basketball team. Not good at all. But they make a nice little improvement. They go on the road once again this past Saturday at Purdue. And I would say after losing to Ohio State in the way that they did, this was kind of desperately needed to be a win. And it needed to be a response to this awful offensive performance that everyone had just seen against the Buckeyes. And that's what they did. 77-65 in not a blowout, but a game that was a comfortable finish by the end of it. And someone I didn't really talk too much about in that Ohio State breakdown was Logan Nisley, and she was great against Iowa, not good against Ohio State, but then came into the starting lineup in this one and was back in that groove somehow that she had against Iowa. She was super encouraging in this performance on the road. 18 points in total, just 10 shots from the field. Extremely efficient night from the freshman. She got some help with an absolutely insane performance from Alexis Markowski, who herself made a nice response in this game, grabbed 21 rebounds to go with her 20 points before fouling out. I mean, kind of a crazy performance from one of the best rebounders in the Big Ten. Played just under 32 minutes because of that foul out, but was clearly an absolute key to Nebraska's domination on the glass. They out-rebounded the Boilermakers 42-26, which, anytime you out-rebound a team in that way, in that fashion, in that dominant of a disparity, it's almost impossible for the team on the losing end of that to have enough offense and scoring acumen to kind of make enough of a jump and keep themselves in this game. And that's why you see Nebraska win by 12, because they're getting extra chances, taking chances away from Purdue. And Purdue is a bad rebounding team on the season, but I feel like Nebraska just made sure that, at least on that night, they were even worse than they are on average in this game. It seemed like the Huskers were really looking to prove that they were not kind of a fluky team that, they beat Iowa, but that's not really what this team is really all about. They're more of a 6th or 7th spot in the Big Ten. No, they quieted some of those discussions and took care of business against Purdue, a team that challenged Nebraska in Lincoln. The Huskers beat them, but it was not an easy game. It was almost similar to this one, where it took some effort, it took a high-scoring game in this game at Purdue, but just a couple of weeks ago, Nebraska won 68-54. And until kind of a late game push, Nebraska was playing close with Purdue. So it's impressive that they take care of the Boilermakers in both games, home and on the road. That's a season sweep. Always looks good on the resume. Not sure what it's going to do in terms of boosting their rankings for March Madness or in the net, because, again, Purdue is not one of the top teams in the Big Ten currently. They're, at this point, third worst in the Big Ten standings. So not going to do too much for you to beat that team. But if you lose to that team, it will hurt you quite a bit. So it's really hard to go into those games because you have to be mentally strong at this point in the season because, it's easy to say, well, what does this win even do for us? It's not going to move us up, but a loss sure will move you down, and you can't afford that. Jazz Shelley put together nearly a triple-double in this game with, once again, 18 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists in a response of her own. It seemed like Nebraska's top players really came back into form in this game on the road this past weekend. I don't know if maybe they were just still coming down from that huge win against Iowa or what, but all those turnovers in Ohio State really put a sour taste in a lot of Husker fans' mouth, and they fixed a lot of those issues just like that in the next game. So I think that shows some good things as well, to be able to turn around after a big loss like that, not let it spiral, not let it snowball, and get back on track. Really important stuff. And but just quickly on Jazz, it's been kind of mentally exhausting to talk about her season at this point because there's games where she plays insanely good, like she did against Iowa. And then there's games where she's completely pedestrian, like she was against Ohio State. You'd like some more consistency and kind of a floor that you can expect from Jazz Shelley at this point in her career as a talented veteran of the Big Ten Conference and of college basketball as a whole. But, sometimes you have to live with it. And she, luckily for Nebraska, had one of her good games. But they've got a big one coming up tonight, 8 p.m. Central Time against Northwestern. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the show, but I'm going to step aside once more on Huskers Hoops Live. When I come back, we'll start to look around at the Big Ten standings and kind of postseason projections in just a minute right here on KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
You never know when you may need help. When danger strikes, you'll be ready to respond thanks to UNL Campus Security. UNL Campus Security works behind the scenes to maintain the safe, welcoming campus environment we all enjoy. In addition to the work they do under the radar, the UNL Campus Police is on call 24 hours a day at 402-472-2222. Remember, dial 2 for blue, 402-472-2222. Loving Nebraska has never been easier. Spread your Husker pride with more than a flag waving in the yard on a fall Saturday. Join the Nebraska Alumni Association and spread that Husker power. Membership costs less than $1 a week, and recent graduates get a discount. So if you are ready to continue your support and remain a part of the Sea of Red, visit HuskerAlum.org to learn more and to continue cheering on your Nebraska Cornhuskers. Again, that's HuskerAlum.org.
The opportunity to grow your own fruits and vegetables the way you like them is right at your fingertips. In neighborhoods just like yours, Community Crops lends various plots of land to families in which they can grow their own food. Join hundreds of families in the Lincoln community as they work this spring planting and harvesting crops in the city's 15 gardens. Start today by registering for the Community Crops Training Program, or to learn more, visit www.communitycrops.org.
Do you want to make a difference for kids, for people in poverty, for the environment? Join AmeriCorps and get things done right here in Nebraska. With lots of different programs to choose from, you can serve in your area of passion and develop your skills while earning money to pay for college or to repay student loans. All programs are filling AmeriCorps positions to start September 1st. Learn more and apply at serve.nebraska.gov. Sponsored by Serve Nebraska. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
This is Logan.
What's up, everyone?
Logan's been going to UNL for 4 years now.
I know everything that's going on here.
Logan is somewhat informed about campus events.
Like the football game? And I think there's some kind of election, I think.
Don't be like Logan. Pick up a copy of the Daily Nebraskan or follow them on Facebook and Twitter. Not only can you be updated with events on campus, you can read profiles on some of the most interesting people around Lincoln and get unique coverage found nowhere else. Because keeping up with the news is one of the most important things a student can do.
Getting involved on campus, meeting new friends, and networking for the future can seem scary, but Scarlet Guard makes it easy for both graduate and undergraduates. Social events help students connect with others around campus, while the professional events help students network with alumni from around the globe. Possibilities within Scarlet Guard are endless, so join today. Go to huskeralum.org/Scarlet Guard or contact the Nebraska Alumni Association. Students today, alumni tomorrow, Huskers forever.
Jake Schrantz back with you on Huskers Hoops Live. Back half of the show this week. Time to look around the Big Ten standings and also some postseason projections. It's getting late in the season. Huskers have just a couple more games on the schedule. And actually, I want to double check this. I believe the women's team, including tonight, only has 3 more games. Men's team, they've got Indiana on Wednesday, and then 4 more games in the regular season until we are postseason the rest of the way through. So let's look at the men's basketball standings in the Big Ten. You've got Purdue still at the top, even though they lost to Ohio State earlier in the week. 23-3 overall, folks. That is a great record. Probably still going to be the top seed in all of the March Madness tournament. But Illinois is right behind them at 10-4 in the conference. They are going to be probably a top 4 seed, maybe top 5 in the March Madness tournament. You've got Northwestern at 3rd. They have made a really nice late season run. They are 18-8 overall. And you've got Michigan State and Wisconsin as the last two teams ahead of the Huskers. However, if Nebraska is able to finish the season strong, they are in range to potentially get to maybe that third or fourth spot in the Big Ten. Definitely a chance to get into the top 5, because if you look at Wisconsin, they just lost again this weekend to Iowa. And so that's the team right ahead of the Huskers that Nebraska's already gone 1-1 on the season with. And then you've got an 8-7 conference record for Nebraska, 9-6 for Wisconsin. And if the Badgers continue to fall off the map, the Huskers could quickly, in these last few games, move up into that 5th spot in the Big Ten. And I think at that point, the Huskers, they are a lock. They're already projected as a Big Ten or as a March Madness team in men's basketball, but there have still been discussions of, is this Nebraska team a bubble watch team? And maybe with another loss on the season, especially at home, which I don't think will happen, but if it did, man, you would really see some people saying, hey, are we really going to put this Nebraska team, a team that doesn't have a conference win, in the March Madness tournament? They're 0-7 on the road. I should say not a conference win on the road. They are 0-7 in that category. Are they really going to get in with another loss and not even 20 wins? That's why I feel like it's so important for Nebraska to finish so strong, because the strength of schedule hasn't been great in the non-conference, and a lot of these losses have not looked good. You've got, the most recent one against Northwestern that was awful to see. So it would be great if Wisconsin could start to fall off, and maybe even some of these other teams. Like if Michigan State, they're technically only, maybe 1.5 games ahead of Nebraska at this point. I mean, they're playing well, and they've got a matchup in the midweek that's coming up as well. That's a team that, hey, maybe if some teams make an upset, maybe Nebraska jumps Michigan State. They've already beaten the Spartans, so they've got a little bit of a tiebreaker there. And, I mean, I know when you look at it, they've got the longest winning streak in the conference. They've won their last 3, and they're 8-2 in their last 10. That's second best to Purdue in that category the last 10 games. So they are extremely hot at this point, but maybe it's time someone cools them off, and Nebraska could try to sneak up into that top 5, maybe top 4. It'd be crazy to see, especially because of a couple of these games are on the road, and Nebraska has not been great in that scenario, but there's no time like the present to figure some things out. But Nebraska in that 6th spot with a couple of teams trailing them that are not too far behind. You've got Minnesota at 7-7. They are in that 7 spot right behind Nebraska, and that's a game that comes up this weekend in Lincoln. It's going to be a massive one, because if Nebraska loses that game, there's a chance they could move into that 7 spot in the Big Ten. And at this point in the season, that would force the Huskers to really have to make some moves into the Big Ten tournament if they want to get in, because Minnesota would take that 6th spot gladly and kind of position themselves into the spot that Nebraska is currently in for March Madness. So it's a stressful time in the season for Coach Hoiberg. I'm sure he is not getting a lot of sleep right now. And let's look at the women's basketball Big Ten standings. Ohio State in that top spot, 13-1 in the conference, 22-3 overall. Iowa right behind them at 12-2 in Big Ten play, 23-3 overall. But then you've got Indiana only ahead of Nebraska. The Huskers are 4th in the Big Ten standings. Not a lot of chance to catch those top 3 at all. Those are the top 3 teams in the Big Ten by far. They all have double-digit conference wins, less than 3, or like they've got 3 or less conference losses if you include Indiana in that top 3. So Nebraska's kind of in that 4th position trying to hold off everybody else. That's kind of the late season scenario. They're trying to hold off Michigan State and Maryland, 2 very talented teams that Nebraska has taken on earlier this season, including a win on the road at Michigan State. But that Spartans team is so good, and they're making a late season push. it's going to be hard for Nebraska to hold them off. But a big win tonight against Northwestern, the second worst team in the Big Ten in terms of conference record. They're 3-11. Big win against that one. Very similar to Purdue, where, yeah, maybe in terms of postseason standings and moving your seed up, it's not going to do that. But if you lose this game, especially at home, your seed is going to drop quite a bit as an at-large, and you might fall behind Michigan State, and then all of a sudden that net ranking is going to drop a bit. So you want to stay up in that 30 spot, which let's get into that now. The Huskers women's basketball team, they are positioned at the 30th spot in the net ranking, which, if you don't know, has a lot to do with what teams make March Madness, kind of just an overall ranking of these teams. And South Carolina, Stanford, UConn, all at the top, in the top 3 spots in the nation in the net ranking. Kind of surprising to me that Ohio State is 8th in the net ranking, even though they're second ranked in the AP poll. I think Ohio State is very talented, and I think they should at least be in that top 5, maybe in the spot that Iowa's in at that 5 spot in the net ranking. Kind of crazy there, but Nebraska at 30. They are literally 1 spot ahead of Maryland in the net. So Maryland, they are a little bit farther behind in the Big Ten standings, but they've had some tough schedule and a couple quality wins. And if Nebraska doesn't keep their season under control here at the end, Maryland could jump them and maybe supplant them at that one of the top seeds in March Madness. But on the men's side of things in the net ranking, they're holding on to that 50 position, and they actually moved up 1 in this week. They beat Penn State, so they move up 1 spot, and now they're at 49. So, yeah, you're inside that 64 that you want to be for kind of saying, hey, we are a top 64 team. We're a March Madness team, right? But in any more losses on this season, I think just based on the way that these committees have been valuing the Big Ten, and especially valuing Nebraska, I mean, they haven't really gotten any votes this season, really, for top 25 in the AP poll. So clearly this committee and a lot of these people in the media don't value a lot of these wins for Nebraska, even though they've got top 10 wins over Purdue and Wisconsin. Those are probably the 2 that they really respected, I would say. So if any more losses come in that schedule, I would not be surprised if you see Nebraska drop quite a bit in the net ranking, because if you fall a little bit closer to that 60 spot, that's when things get extremely hairy and stressful for March Madness seeding, because right now in the bracketology, on the men's side of things, the Huskers on ESPN in the bracketology are projected a pretty interesting matchup. I want to talk about it real quick. They are projected to go to Charlotte right now as a 10 seed. They've moved up, and they've got Utah State projected in the first round. That's a 7-10. That's kind of a coin flip almost. 2 high-powered offensive teams. If Nebraska can win that, they go up against number 2 seed Tennessee or potentially Quinnipiac. But I think Tennessee will win that game if that is how the brackets go. And this is a matchup of 2 very similar style teams. Tennessee, they like to play fast. They like to shoot threes. They're very veteran-led. You look at Nebraska. What do they like to do? They like to move fast. They like to shoot threes. And they're very veteran-led. Does that mean Nebraska could upset Tennessee if that is the matchup that we see in March Madness? I'm not sure. But it could be a very fun matchup to watch, a very entertaining game that I think a lot of people could get their brackets busted in the first weekend if Nebraska can pull off a huge upset, not even just picking up their first March Madness win as an underdog in program history, but then going on to compete and maybe beat a Tennessee team that is seeded extremely highly or extremely high. That would be insane to see. On the women's side of things, in the ESPN bracketology, Nebraska's currently an 8 seed. And man, if this prediction is right, it is a tough draw because they've got Miami one of the top teams out of the ACC in an 8-9 matchup. If they win that, they've got to go play South Carolina, the top overall seed. How many times can Nebraska draw something like this? I mean, that is just so unlucky. And where Nebraska's positioned, that's why you want to get as high as possible in the net rankings, so you can get out of that 8-9 spot and get away from some of those top seeds. You either want to be maybe a 6 or a 5 so that you can have that, advantage as you're facing teams worse than you for quite a bit in the tournament. But right as you're at that 8 seed, you're playing hard team after hard team after hard team every single round. So Nebraska is in a very entertaining and interesting positions. Some people would have it no other way. You want to be in those spot that people are going to talk about quite a bit. But I'm going to step aside here on Huskers Hoops Live one more time on the show. We'll come back, preview some of these upcoming games for this week, as they are very important, clearly, just based on what we were talking about for postseason standings right here on 90.3 KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
If you're experiencing anxiety, depression, grief, or are even just homesick, try talking to a friendly professional at CAPS, your university's counseling and psychological service. They offer individual and group services to any registered student at UNL. International students, that means you too. Just call your university health center on city campus anytime Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The services are easy and confidential, and the best part is the first 3 sessions are free. Go online at health.unl.edu/CAPS.
Imagine what it would be like to live in a different country for a month, a couple months, or even a year. You may think,
I don't have money for that.
Or,
it won't fit into my 4-year college plan.
But the Education Abroad office at UNL wants you to know an education abroad is possible for anyone. There are over 400 scholarships to help fund your trip and an advising staff ready to assist with all the planning. So set up your advising session today. Go to educationabroad.unl.edu. The world is waiting for you.
For a little extra help settling in at college, look to UNL's first-year experience and transition programs. You can receive one-on-one student coaching and tutoring to get you through that tough course, or you can attend free workshops for information on stress, money, even jobs and internships. First-year experience and transition programs will assist you with academic support or general life skills to make your experience at UNL successful. Stop by First-Year Experience and Transition Programs located at 127 Love Library South.
Exaggerating high school athletic achievements to your new college friends. Promising your new college friends that you'd a partial football scholarship to no-name state in Montana. What are these, you ask? These are the symptoms of someone with high school peaker syndrome, or HSPS. HSPS is a serious mental health condition that affects college students post-high school athletics. Thankfully, there is a cure to this crippling disease known as the UNL men's rugby team. UNL men's rugby team offers students the opportunity to relive those glory days. Tackle your HSPS head-on by visiting the rugby team's website at unlrugby.com.
This is Logan.
What's up, everyone?
Logan's been going to UNL for 4 years now.
I know everything that's going on here.
Logan is somewhat informed about campus events.
Like the football game? And I think there's some kind of election, I think.
Don't be like Logan. Pick up a copy of the Daily Nebraskan or follow them on Facebook and Twitter. Not only can you be updated with events on campus, you can read profiles on some of the most interesting people around Lincoln and get unique coverage found nowhere else, because keeping up with the news is one of the most important things a student can do.
Jake Schrott's back with you, wrapping up the 16th episode of the season of Huskers Hoops Live as we take a look ahead for this week and see if Nebraska can figure out some wins, because there's some tough matchups on the docket this week. First up for the men's basketball team, 2 games this week. No longer are there any more no midweek matchup weeks until the end of the season, where they've got Michigan on the road. But you've got Indiana on Wednesday. That's tomorrow, 7:30 p.m. Central Time. The last matchup between these two teams was in Lincoln. Huskers won 86-70. Very impressive win. And in that one, you get 28 points from Keisei Tominaga on 15 shots. He just completely took over the second half, if you remember, but they also got 15 from Bryce Williams, 12 points from Jamarcus Lawrence, and 9 points on 10 shots for Rink Mast. Not a great night for Rink. If it was, Nebraska might have scored 100. You look at the numbers, Nebraska dominated Indiana in this game. What are the chances of this repeating? I'm not so sure, because Indiana, again, not a bad team. They're a little bit lower in the standings in the conference, but they've got some high-level talent that I think Nebraska might struggle with just a little bit. They've got 2 top 15 scorers in the Big Ten this season. You've got Malik Reneau with 15.7 points per game, and Khalil Ware is giving you 15 a game on average. That's 11th and 15th in Big Ten scoring, respectively. Nebraska, their leading scorer, Keisei Tominaga, on the season, 17th in the Big Ten. So not only is their first scorer higher than Nebraska, their second scorer is higher than anyone Nebraska's bringing into this game. So you have to be a little bit concerned about that, because the Hoosiers are not going to give this one to the Huskers. And going into Bloomington is going to be a battle. As always, I'm looking at how Nebraska is going to manage the front court attack of Indiana. It's going to have to be a big game from Rink Mast. He's going to need to be physical. Josiah Allick is going to need to bring some heat. And I think that big lineup for the Huskers is really going to be challenged in this game. Indiana, they are 3-7 in their last 10 games. Their last win came almost 2 weeks ago at Ohio State, 76-73. But they have lost their last 2 games to Purdue and Northwestern. So they haven't won a home game since January 30th against Iowa. But again, it's a road game. Nebraska has been so different in terms of performance on the road this year. And the Hoosiers really need this win to kind of get back on track and build some late season momentum. So there's a lot of importance for both teams. And I think it's going to lead to an entertaining battle. It's going to be seen on the rebounding category. You got Rink Mast and Khalil Ware, 2 of the best in the Big Ten, 2 top 5 rebounders. Rink Mast is at 5th. Khalil Ware currently 3rd in the conference, only trailing Juju Reese and Zach Edey. So keep your eye on the glass on Wednesday for a big-time matchup. The last road outing for the Huskers, again, that Northwestern one, 80-68, terrible loss. They didn't look like they were in it at any point until maybe the last few minutes when they were just throwing up desperation shots, and they were going in, but Northwestern was able to just hold off Nebraska enough. But at this point in the year, I think we know what this Nebraska team is in hostile territory, and they're going to have to prove everyone wrong until these people stop talking about this narrative. So we'll see if they can get it done against a team that's struggling. But then after that game, they head back home against Minnesota, the penultimate home game of the season, this coming Sunday, 5:30 p.m. Central Time. These teams last played on all the way back in December 6th in Minneapolis, if you remember, where Nebraska blew a 39-24 first half lead. And that was the first road loss of the season. Kind of never recovered from there. I mean, Nebraska is last in the Big Ten in road record, tied with Ohio State at 0-7. And they ended up giving up 15 points for the Gophers' Josh Ola-Joseph. That led them in scoring. But the big story in that one was that Dawson Garcia barely played due to an injury he suffered in the first half. Didn't really end up coming back in that one. He only played 6 minutes and 45 seconds. He's 6th in the Big Ten in scoring. So you didn't even have to play too much against Dawson Garcia and still gave up that massive lead that you went into halftime with. So this has a chance to be a bad day that Nebraska kind of continues this great defensive run for Minnesota, though, because if Dawson Garcia doesn't play very much, or he's in foul trouble, or he's just not able to get his game going, similar to his impact in the first matchup where he got injured, I think the way that Nebraska has been defending their home floor as of late, the last 2 weeks, has been extremely impressive. And Minnesota is not the best offensive team. They are pretty good. They're top 5. But Only 59 points to Michigan allowed by Nebraska. Only 49 points allowed in the last game to Penn State. So, yeah, Minnesota's bringing some offensive firepower, but the defense of Nebraska in the vault has been incredible. It's been locked down. So it's going to be needed and necessary and important that Nebraska brings that defense, because there's a chance. I mean, with how bad Indiana's been as of late, if Nebraska picks up their first Big Ten road win tomorrow night, and then you come back on Sunday against Minnesota, show some more defense off, we could be looking at a 20-8 Nebraska Cornhuskers men's basketball team. It's been a while since anyone has said those words, and it's been the truth. So we'll have to talk next week about what a 20-8 Nebraska team potentially would do for their standings as we'll look around again at the postseason scenarios. But upcoming for the women's basketball team, you've got Northwestern tonight, a chance to advance to 18-9 on the season. That's a very strong 2-1 win-loss ratio. And I feel like a win tonight could really help place Nebraska in that 4 spot in the Big Ten. Again, I said it earlier on in the show, Michigan State very close to the Huskers right now. They are trailing them at 8-6 in the conference. A Nebraska slip up tonight, or even the last 2 games of the season, could very well mean kind of falling back to 5th or even 6th in the conference. If Maryland, a team that's right behind them in the net ranking, can push themselves up even higher. So really important game tonight, hosting the Northwestern Wildcats. They come into this matchup with that net 30 ranking, like we said, and it's those question marks that I talked about earlier on in the open with this lawsuit that's kind of in play. I'm very interested to see if this team can manage all these questions, manage all this distraction, kind of come together as a team and figure it out. Not going to be easy, though, I will say, with the media attention that this Nebraska program gets. Northwestern Wildcats, they've lost their last 3 games, I should say. Averaged just around 60 points per game offensively in this stretch, while giving up 81 points a game in that stretch. Kind of an average for them on the season. They are not a good defensive team. They give up over 81 points a game on the year. So I think this should be a good chance for Nebraska to get their offense back kind of working a little bit better than it has been the last few games. They got 77 against Purdue this weekend, but 47 the game prior to Ohio State. Not effective. Let's move on to Minnesota. Senior Day at 4 p.m. Central Time on Saturday. Again, it's a Minnesota and Nebraska weekend. Back-to-back days, and Nebraska needs both of them. The Huskers lost 62-58 on the road last time these teams faced off on January 14th. You'll remember the Huskers were kind of out of the game late in that one until Callan Hake hit some buckets to push it close, but just not enough to push them over the bar and get that road win. We'll see if they can do it in this one, though. And again, if we're looking at a 2-win week for the Huskers against Northwestern and then against Minnesota, you're looking at a 19-9 women's basketball program. And if the Huskers men can go 2-0 this week, you're looking at a 20-8 men's basketball program. A renaissance of sorts for Nebraska ball over the past year. And I got to tell you, it's been so fun to watch, so encouraging to come at every single week on Huskers Hoops Live and talk about a team and talk about a couple of teams that are competent and showing legit growth as a program. It was kind of exhausting the first couple of years talking about loss after loss after loss. But this year, it's been really fun to see this team come out there, put up entertaining performances that end in upset wins, huge wins for the program. You've got Iowa on the women's side of things. You've got Wisconsin and Purdue and Michigan State on the men's side of things. Just a lot of fun covering this team and this program for the last couple of months in Huskers Hoops Live this season, and we're going to continue it on the rest of the way through the year. We've got postseason coming up, Big Ten tournament coming up for the women in the next week or so. So it's getting to that point in the year that everyone likes and everyone loves, because March Madness is one of the best sports experiences that you can ask for. So Going to wrap up the show this week. We'll be back with you Tuesday morning next week, 8 to 9 a.m. Central Time as always. But with that being said, go Big Red.